Hello, and welcome to the November wrap-up. Apologies for being gone for a little while. Grace and I were travelling to the UK to visit my family and such things, and friends and all that jazz. And good old me did not plan for that. I did have my video with Joanna talking about I Who Have Never Known Men, a long video, so hopefully that tided people over who wanted to watch it. A kind of deep dive, mostly spoiler talk. If you haven't seen it, I would really recommend it. I know I was in it, so I would hope I'd recommend it. But I thoroughly enjoyed that, and it will be a kind of continuing series now. I do have a backlog of videos that I need to now make and discuss. But to begin with, we're just going to do a classic, nice little reading wrap-up to let you know how the month went. I did a lot of reading before going away, a little bit while away. Not too much, honestly. But to begin with, we finished His Dark Materials. I read The Amber Spyglass, completing the read-along that the Discord's been doing. Yeah, I mean, I gave it 3 stars. It's still a good book. Still a good book. I enjoyed it. It just didn't work for me the way that the first 2 did. Specifically the first book. That first book is one of my favourite books of all time now. I loved Northern Lights, The Golden Compass, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, The Amber Spyglass, I'm going to do a full, mostly spoilers talk on it. But unfortunately, the best way to describe the climax to this series for me is that there is a thematic / social commentary that is being done, and certain character arcs are sacrificed for the necessary journey that the whole saga is going on. And yeah, I didn't believe some of the transitions that we were having for some of our characters. I didn't enjoy some of the changes for some of our characters, and they filled an archetype that I was just kind of like, isn't this everything we were trying to oppose? And maybe that is the case, but I didn't appreciate having to do it to break it, if you know what I mean. So, unless you haven't read it, then you don't know what I mean. But, nevertheless, there will be a longer video on this, so that's all I'm going to say. But leave it to be said that I think you should 100% read Northern Lights. And if you love Northern Lights, I would continue, because I think that you'll still get a lot from this entire series. And I am glad that I read this series, and I do plan on reading the second trilogy. So when this is 3 stars, this is not actually, you hated it 3 stars. This is not most people's 3 stars. This is that I enjoyed myself, but that I was so heavily conflicted throughout it. There were things I loved, there were things I hated, and so it all came together in this experience that aggregates out to I enjoyed it. But I would be lying to myself if I didn't acknowledge how many gripes I had with certain things, and how frustrated I was that when the bits I did love came up, I was like, oh my god, here it is, like a breath of fresh air. So I can't. And the other thing is that the series resolved itself in a way that I was pleased with. I felt like the way we landed was strong, and it did deliver. Like, I'm glad that the things that were sacrificed through the book led to an ending. I was like, okay, I can be happy here. If it had been a quagmire to reach a fucking like a dry desert, then I would be miserable. I think that was the most mixed metaphors you could put in one sentence. I apologise, but they are the words I said, and so I'll stick with them. Amber Spyglass. After that, one thing that I have not been saying through these monthly wrap-ups is that I have been reading the Divine Comedy. So in November, I read the Paradiso. So I have now read all of the Divine Comedy. I read it over the last 3-4 months. And fantastic. 100% recommend at least the Inferno. Because the Inferno, by virtue of the formation of this Divine Comedy, this trilogy essentially, is that the first is the most kind of antagonistic, the most condemnatory, the most full of kind of spunk, I suppose you'd call it. To give the actual meaning, I don't want to come across as crass or anything. It's the one that is kind of the most flagrant. Dante's chatting shit about people. I had no idea about Virgil. I had no idea about Beatrice. And so, yeah, I was kind of fascinated with the actual journey that is his religious and philosophical musings, his kind of declarations that he makes. There's some really fascinating... The thing that I really enjoyed, I would really recommend this edition. Obviously, I can't comment on any others. But specifically, John Ciardi, who translates this, kind of makes... There's so much kind of historical notage throughout this. It's actually one of the things that makes specifically the Purgatorio and the Paradiso very difficult to read, is that I would say each canto, there's probably 3 times as many pages providing all of the historical context and all of the literary context for everything that Dante is discussing. This is a thing that I think you have to read countless times to actually pay attention and pick up on everything that is occurring. So, but I think John Ciardi does it really well in terms of the thing that he kind of says is that the reason he's translating it is because he finds that most of the translations he's read does not convey the kind of casual verbiage that Dante is using, the actual vernacular he's using isn't capturing the essence. It hasn't been captured in essence by the previous translations. So this is still a really gorgeous translation in the sense of like the feeling of the rhythm of the rhyming scheme and everything. This is not Italian, this isn't the true rhyming scheme, which is rhyming triplets. Instead, he has there's a couplet, one at each end with a line in the middle, because he basically is like the amount of forced word choices, the limitation of the English language compared to the Italian in creating rhymes that consistently in such a short amount of time. He was like, it doesn't work in his opinion, or at least to his ability, and so he did it this way. Obviously, I think Dante's one, like, I think the Divine Comedy is one of those texts that reading different translations can only be a positive, because it provides new readings as you do it, and different historical contexts that other people may have left out or changed or comment on differently, etc. So I thought this was a really good one to start with, because it was context heavy and more casual verbiage, which made it easier to read. The Patreon pick was Kate Beaton's Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands, which is a graphic novel, as you can see here, which chronicles Kate Beaton, who was, at the time, she had just graduated college, graduated university, had massive debts, and so moved to Alberta, moved to the oil sands to make money. It was basically seen as that's where everyone went to make money, to be able to pay off loans, to be able to afford a good life, etc. And it is about her experience there, the treatment she had from a predominantly male industry, abuse she suffered, the both kind of misogynistic, sexual, and harassing, and then violent experiences she had. So this is an incredibly difficult read, but I do think it was exceptional. I gave it 4.5 stars. The best way I can describe it, so firstly, it's a very nuanced approach. Kate Beaton is someone who clearly, I would say, seems still unsure on making declarative statements. This is a very nuanced piece. one of the things she says kind of in the afterword is that she didn't want to convey the idea that everything was horrible or everything was good or forgive or condemn everyone or anyone, because it's like she kind of ruminates on the idea of people she knows and whether they would be affected going there and whether this is just human nature inside of that place. Or it was one of those things that obviously this is something that haunts this person evidently because they are writing about it, and this is not a conclusion by any means. This is almost like a way of writing down feelings to then be able to ruminate on. But the other thing is that I've read something like Call Me By My Name, which are obviously also is very different, but something that deals with sexual abuse and sexual harassment, societal kind of echo chambers and conversations and everything. The one thing I would say is that I remember Call Me By My Name, by virtue of it being prose and being as long as it is an emotionally devastating experience that goes on for a while. Like I read that book probably over 2.5 weeks, and it affected my mood, it affected my interactions with other people, because it is such a horrid reading experience because of what occurred. And so the one thing I do think is that Ducks is still emotionally devastating, but I would say if you're someone who is affected and is not able to consume something like that, in the sense of being in that headspace for such a long amount of time, with something like Call Me By My Name, that Ducks is something that I think you could read in a day, but it still hammers home that feeling. I read everyone's the booktube darling of the world right now, which was The Will of the Many by James Islington. Islington. It is Islington. Islington is how I pronounce it because I'm English. I apologise. James Islington, which was really good. The best way to describe it, I gave this a 4.25. I thought it was really good. I enjoyed my time reading it. Certain things I would critique. We need to stop with these half sentences. There's a certain thing. I'll actually load it to read you. I put it in chat because I was just so frustrated. I don't know what editors are doing now, and from what I've seen people talk about the second book so far, people are talking about the editing there as well. So they need to fucking buck up with this shit. So, yes, the example is that there's a bit where so I'm not going to say the character's name, I'm just going to say character. But it's character shakes her head, full stop, visibly warning me off. That's one sentence. That is not two sentences. Character shakes her head. That's not even two clauses. That's just character shakes her head, visibly warning me off. And I know people will be like, who gives a shit? I do. I apologise, but there's just certain things that it grinds my fucking arsehole. And that's one of them, where it's just like, there's no reason. Character shakes her head, full stop, visibly warning me off. I just can't do it. So things like that frustrate me in here. I will say first person present tense is not my favourite. Obviously, the author has said that the reason he did it is because his last series was third person past tense and a multi-POV, so he wanted to experiment and try something radically different, which I do admire, and I do think he does a good job with that. But certain word choices, certain sentences that he writes, certain just phrasing, certain grammatical choices, I feel like it feels like an experiment in some ways, because there are certain things where I would stop and be like, hate that sentence, hate that you put those words in that particular order with the punctuation you did. What are you doing, sir? So Nevertheless, the plotting, fast-paced, really interesting, multi-faceted characters. You never quite feel sure of who is who and what their motivations are and whose side you should be on. I don't know why I'm explaining this like every single person in the fucking world hasn't read The Will of the Many. Let me just cut all that bullshit. It was really solidly paced. I had a really fun time reading it. My main issues with this book, like I said, are the actual writing in the sense of some of his phrasing and punctuation usage, which, fair enough. The other thing is that we do unfortunately have just a male superhero, in the sense of he knows everything, he's massively educated, etc., etc. He deals with every situation. I never felt like our character was in any kind of danger because he was just that cool. He was a fucking geezer. He could just clear that shit out. If he needs to beat someone up, if he needs to beat him at something, if he needs to mentally beat them, at every facet, he was like, luckily, I'm a fucking legend. And I'd already learned this shit because I'm a fucking legend. And I'm super smart and super fucking strong. And I was just kind of like, okay, sir, I'm not 15 years old. I don't need to read a character that in the first book is the greatest genius to ever grace God's green earth. So that's a gripe. And the other thing is that this is a gripe I have. I apologise. I'm going to bring up class shit again. Poor British person here. Class is important. And I do find it frustrating that we have a character who is framed at the beginning as a foundling, youngling, kind of orphan character, poor situation, struggling, and then by the time you're about half of the way in, it's like, actually, I was educated by some of the cleverest fuckers in the entire world, and I'm actually super strong and super clever, and my family are actually not poor as shit. I come from a rich family, and I was royalty, and everyone thought I was the coolest. And can we just have? Can you commit to having a poor character that can also be smart? Like, when it was the idea that he taught himself and everything, I was like, great. We're showing the fact that education is important. The idea that this person has elevated themselves through education, and as a result they have given themselves the means to grasp onto opportunities and create something from that. No. They learned to value education because they were raised by very rich, wealthy, royalty people. And actually, he's not a povo. He's not a dirty fucking poverty-ridden cunt. This is your royalty. And I'm just like, God damn it, can we have some uncomfortability for the person reading this book? I understand that books are predominantly read by fucking wealthy people, or middle class people, or that kind of thing. Someone who has the means to pay $40 for a fucking hardback. Can you take the gloves off a little? Can we follow a first person perspective where you're poor? Can you commit to that? I just found that frustrating. Like, by the time we got to the end, I was like, why did we even have the falsity of that idea? Just fucking say that they're a rich cunt to begin with. Nevertheless, I apologise. That's me. It was still really good though. Like that, I think that's what I'm trying to say is that as a male power fantasy, this is fantastic, because usually I would boil my own piss before that, but I still came away from it really enjoying it. So it did its job very well to make me entertained the entire time. All of that is to say we're going to move on to the Empusium by Olga Tokarczuk, which I don't know how to explain this book, because for most of this book I thought I was going to give it 3 stars, and I finished the book and think it may be one of the best books I have ever read in my entire life. And I don't know how to reconcile those two feelings. In number form, I just went, yeah, we'll give it a 4 then. But the more I think about this book, the more I am genuinely in awe of what this author did. And honestly, like, with Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. But I was like, this is interesting, the idea that they are a Nobel Prize winner for that. Something like the Empusium, I'm like, that is Nobel Prize worthy, because this book follows you are kind of following this young man suffering from tuberculosis in just post World War One, and it's based on the Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, which is about this guy traveling to a sanatorium and talking to the people there about their opinions on philosophy and history and politics and all these different things. And it's this long book kind of ruminating on the time of which it was written and the thoughts and feelings and ethics and morals of those at the time. And the Empusium is this same story, this young Polish man going to this sanatorium and talking to the people that he is there with, learning about their lives, learning about their opinions and their ethics and their morals. And at the same time, something is watching. There's a feeling of something not quite right, something possibly supernatural in the area. We're following predominantly male characters, almost exclusively male characters, in the earlier 20th century. And every single... The thing that's kind of a black comedy satire on the Magic Mountain is that every single point, every single philosophical argument, every single political argument, everything resolves basically around the point of, well, at least we're not women. Women are inherently inferior. That kind of thought process. And that's the reason why the book felt so long and why I was struggling, because after a while you're like, okay, fuck me, I get it. I get this fucking sucks. And I think that's why I think this book is genius. Because I'm not going to spoil the ending. I'm not even going to discuss the ending. I think it's just an experience you have to have. All of that feeling of like, where I don't get it. I feel like I know where this is going. Why do I even care? And some people may not even connect to it the same way I did. But the way I felt is that Olga Tokarczuk as an author was watching me, and I was there kind of being like, I know where this book is going. Trust me. I've read books about how like these awful men are talking about women. I know where this is going. And her as an author, she just went, actually, I think you're full of shit. You haven't even thought about this. The twist of this book is, I think, a twist that will be almost universal for a lot of people. I know that's not conflating as a concept, but apart from those who are acutely aware of it, I think for most people this will be a twist in the sense of it reveals a thought process that won't even occur to almost anyone reading the book. And I felt like she slapped me round the face and went, you think you're so kind of great as this man that you're like, oh, people used to have such terrible thoughts about women and that kind of thing. And now you're kind of got comfortable in that and you're like, yeah, this is just another one of those books. And it's like, she was like, you haven't even begun to think about other people and what needs to happen and who you are in terms of how you view things, and you're thinking too simply and all of this stuff. I felt like she really, like I said, just slapped me around the face. That is not an experience I can say I get often from a book. And I've just come away from it and I'm like, I still acknowledge. It's one of those things where I will never put it as a 5-star publicly, because it is one of those things where I have to acknowledge the fact that, kind of like the Amber Spyglass being 3 stars, I acknowledge both aspects. The Empusium, I have to acknowledge that it wasn't always a 5-star, Because if someone goes in being like, this is a 5-star, then they'll expect the entire book to be 5 stars. Because that's just the nature of how reading is now. Whereas the Empusium is something that dares to be like, I'm going to commit to tediousness, a little bit of pacing issue. I'm going to commit to creating expectation to slap you in the face. And I think the literary audacity of that, like I said, the Empusium is an experience, and I do recommend it, but just be aware that it is a 300-page book, and I would say until the last 70 pages I was going to give it 3 stars, and then I suddenly had this door open, and I realised that this room I was in opened up to a fucking castle, and I was like, oh my god, like, this is not in terms of plot or anything. I don't want to get people the wrong idea that suddenly this thing explodes and it's all bananas and shit. It was ideologically and thought-provokingly, a door opened and I suddenly, it was like the fucking, it was that. So yeah. Then that was the end of my pre-trip reading. Then on the trip I read 2 books. On the day we travelled and got on the plane and everything and flew, I read Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, which you may notice I don't have in my hand. That's not a good sign. I got rid of it. I did get rid of it, but that is because I'm going to get a really nice copy, because I loved Invisible Cities. Very short, created of vignettes. Each vignette is the idea, it's Marco Polo talking to Kublai Khan, in terms of the travels of Marco Polo, if you think about that and when that was and everything. It is Marco Polo telling stories, these kind of 1-2 page vignettes about different cities, imagined, real, whatever. As you go along, it becomes more apparent that he's kind of talking about the same city in different ways, but talking about them as if they're different places. I read it at the perfect time. It was recommended by a friend, and I've been waiting to read it, and I actually chose the perfect time to read it, because the thing I loved about Invisible Cities is that it essentially tells this story about the idea of how everywhere you travel to is a reflection of where you came from. And when you return, where you came from becomes a reflection of every place you've visited. And they're always in dialogue, and that your experience of a place is going to be inherently different than someone else's because of the fact that you are an individual and you are you. And as someone who has left home and moved to a different country and now lived here for over a year, going back home for that first time and seeing family and friends and places I've been, it put me in a mindset to appreciate and not compare, not look for this feeling of something lost or something gained. Instead, to just appreciate being in both places and having the time and loving what I do and that kind of thing. That I really appreciated the philosophical positioning that the book conveyed to me to experience that. And I don't think there could have been a better book to do that. It felt like it was divinely intervened to be like, that's the book you should read, because I had not thought about it at all. And then the day before I was just looking and I was like, I had like 3 choices. Beren and Luthien was one, that kind of thing. I was just like, let me take Invisible Cities, and it paid off. And finally, last but not least, another book that I'm not going to talk too much about, because I'm going to do a whole series review on it. But Orbit kindly also sent me a physical copy of This Brutal Moon by Bethany Jacobs, the final book in the Kingdom trilogy. For those unaware, you may have noticed in my last wrap-ups, I have been reading this series, These Burning Stars and On Vicious Worlds. Gorgeous looking trilogy, first off. I really love the book and cover and everything. Yeah, this is the first book I've ever emailed for that they actually sent me a physical copy. So thank you, Orbit. I feel like a big boy now. And I also saved myself $26, which is nothing to sneeze at. But nevertheless, I had actually already, because there was a whole thing, Canada Post is on strike. Firstly, I support strikes. Get your bag, because we're all being criminally underpaid. Nevertheless, I had been kind of left in limbo, because it seemed like they were sending me a copy, but then I would never know if it was coming because Canada Post is on strike. So was it just not arriving because of that, or was it not being sent? The person I communicated with then was on leave, so when I got sent to a different person, they sent me a NetGalley arc, so I assumed that I wasn't getting this. So I was kind of like, okay, I guess that's it. So I read it while away, and then I came back, and this was waiting for me. So shout out the Orbit team for dealing with my bullshit, because I don't know what happened. Nevertheless, all of that is to say that I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, but this is a series that is more than it's the combination of experience across the 3 books that I think makes this such a great series. I actually think this is up there in my list of best trilogies I've ever read, my favourite trilogies I've ever read, which is firstly rare for a sci-fi for me, and secondly, I don't know what the other point was, but the thing I'd say with this trilogy is, firstly, read it. I would 100% recommend These Burning Stars. Read that. If you love it, read the trilogy, because it maintains that kind of quality of writing, that quality of storytelling, that quality of politicking and grey characters, and this kind of ferocious darkness, this obsession with genocide and rebellion and control, things that are extremely timely, obviously, and the afterword to this book kind of reflects on that. But the one thing I appreciated a lot is that throughout this series, the author does not pull punches. There are quippy bits, not a little bit more than I would like. Like I've said before, I'm not the quippiest reader of all time. Luckily, I think Bethany Jacobs is someone who manages that quite well. I think some of her quips are funny, some of them aren't to me, but the thing that I appreciated is that because it is dealing with such a heavy topic, such a heavy atmosphere the entire time, our characters deal with that in the reality it is. So people do make jokes, but when fucking shit hits the fan, which is almost exclusively, people are on. People are dealing with things seriously. People are not fucking around, let's put it that way. And those that are, that is their character trait, which I think is more realistic. Someone can deal with things that way. Not everyone quips. That's just, for the love of God, we need to start realising that. So I appreciated that she was like, here's the couple of characters that is their mental state, that is how they deal with things. They have the gallows humour. Everyone else is dealing with this shit. And I would say there's certain characters who evolved throughout the series that felt Hobb-esque. I got a real Ketchikan vibe from one character, which I adored. I feel like there was a real sense of character growth and progression. You follow our main character, and they are not perfect. They are very interesting. I don't want to say too much, because obviously it's the 3rd book in the trilogy. But I would say, overall, it landed the ending very well for something on the scale it was. I do think inherently when we are dealing with something this big, trying to do it in a trilogy is sometimes difficult to land. I could have kept reading. I would have read a 4th book. I would have read a 5th book. I do sometimes wish. I feel like in a lot of ways, the scaling of the trilogies being released now are becoming bigger than they used to be, or having a smaller page count, word count, so they're having to get through more. And so I sometimes find myself now wishing that we had a 4th book, a 5th book, which we do get with some things. But yeah, I think I would have really loved a bit more time experiencing some of the changes that occur in this 3rd book. The thing I like about this series is that everything that happens, I can find an analogous thing in my mind to reality if I want to, which I do because I'm a fucking nerd. And I like to be like, oh, I think they're referencing this, I think they're referencing this, this reminds me of this in real world. Especially when we're dealing with something like systematic control and oppression and workers' rights and all these different things, and not going to go into it, but it can also be read as just a fictional trilogy unto itself. It has that multi-layering where I can find the deeper reading and the analogous things and the research and all this stuff, but it isn't necessary, and it simultaneously isn't necessary, and it also doesn't overshadow. It's one of those things where they perfectly line up, and I can see, it creates a full image together for me. But if you take it apart, the 2 images are still separate. It just creates this image together. So yes, recommend. I will be pushing it. Expect that on the channel. You're going to have a full series review. You're going to have me talking about it. One of the books will be on my best books of the year. Just expect it. Deal with it. Just start reading it, and then you'll be alright. You'll be like, this guy's talking man fucking truth. But that is my reading of the month. Fucking massive books. Jesus Christmas, criminy crikers. Nevertheless, if you did enjoy, please do like, please do subscribe. Let me know what you read in the month of November. Did you read any of these? Did you enjoy them? And as always, have a nice rest of your day.